Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I here once again. And, it hasn't been weeks this time, just a couple days. And we have some great news. As most of you know, the NHL has announced their official playoff structure. It is as we thought it would be. And we are here now to break down the entire thing and begin breaking down some series. Who knows when the series are going to begin, but we are going to get an early start, jump in on those. And Justin, your initial thoughts now that we have the official setup for the playoffs, your initial reaction.
Yeah, I guess just first, I'm excited to get some playoff hockey back. I know, it's been months now and everybody's been dying, but at the same, not dying literally, but dying for some playoff hockey. So I mean, just the fact that, Bettman came out and said, hey, we're looking at, doing this, in, this many weeks, and we're planning to put together this 2014 playoff format. It was something we had kind of heard and, thought was a real possibility, but now that it's official, it's interesting. I mean, it's something that, we can look at 50 years from now and say, yeah, that happened once in our lifetime, and we were lucky enough to witness the whole thing.
Yeah, we truly have nothing to compare it to because, I mean, you look at, I guess the closest thing is a lockout year. The season starts later. The players do get quite a bit of time off in the 94-95 season, the 2012-13 season, but they went right from the regular season to the playoffs. We've never had where we play some regular season and then we take 4 months off and then we'll come back and play the playoffs.
Right.
It truly is. It's going to be different. And I mean, on the one hand, you wonder, are we going to see some maybe sloppy play? But on the other hand, everyone's going to be real healthy. I mean, teams that are maybe further down the list come playoff time, if we're playing in April, now playing in July or August, suddenly their top guys are back and they look totally different. Maybe they have a shot at a big upset and can swoop in and do something big with these playoffs. I mean, I truly don't think there's a team in the playoffs right now that can't win a round.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, if you really look at it, right, one example, a team that I looked at was the Colorado Avalanche. They had a lot of big names going out, guys like, Kadri and Rantanen, and now they're going to probably get these guys back, and they're going to be very formidable come, playoff time. And then you even look at some of the other, teams that maybe were outside of the playoff picture. Now they come back and they got a chance to get guys healthy, and should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I guess with that said, I mean, do you have any pushbacks with this? Are you disappointed with the way that this is going to happen? I do think that if they televise them, the weird thing will be watching like Boston playing Tampa Bay in an exhibition game. But I understand the purpose of it. It doesn't bother me. It'll just be kind of weird. Like, are they going to have those games be on TV, or are they going to just be, kind of little practice games? I don't know. I guess, we have preseason on TV, so you'd think that those would be as well. But that I guess is the one, like,
It's nice that the 1 through 4 seeds, they're giving them some games to say, hey, these kind of have a little bit of meaning for seed wise. But
true. Yes. True. I forgot that they have some seeding purposes.
Yeah. But most of those teams probably won't go full out, or, maybe rest a couple guys, and they might not play as hard as they normally would if this was a push for a playoff spot. But regardless, I think it's nice that they give them an opportunity to get some play time in so they can get their legs, because let's face it, if they, come in cold and have to face, say a number 5 Pittsburgh Penguins team that comes in off of, a series win, for example.
Sure. And maybe like a 5-game series and they've got their legs now and things are clicking, and then you got to come in and play your first game. That just wouldn't be fair at all.
No, exactly. And I think the only pushback I might have with this whole ordeal is, part of me wonders, did the NHL purposely expand it for teams like, for example, the Chicago Blackhawks, right? They have one of the biggest markets in all of the U.S. And so did they expand it just to say, hey, we want to get that extra revenue, that extra TV revenue in it? And then, to the only other
both
pushback,
12 seeds, really, Montreal and Chicago, both seeds, yeah.
Yeah, big markets for the NHL. And then the other thing, maybe, I might be a little one-sided on this, but, I've heard some pushback from players and some fans on Twitter, but, the fact that they're going to isolate these guys for a couple months and, are they going to keep them away from their families? I'm sure the NHL is going to be very safe in the way they handle these players going to the rinks, going to games, et cetera, but, are they going to be able to have that interaction with their family? Are they going to be stuck literally in a hotel for 2 months, just going back and forth between practice rink and, game rink? So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I suppose, of course, that would be hard. I think the paycheck makes up for it, personally.
Yes, I would personally sacrifice myself for 2 months for that paycheck.
But I mean, I understand. Like Alexander Ovechkin, he just had a baby a day ago, 2 days ago, or something like that.
Yeah.
You've got guys who want to be able to spend time with their family, and this isn't exactly anything that they signed up for, to be isolated or quarantined away from their family, if that's what it came to. But I certainly that's a downside. But I guess you're making a sacrifice to be able to do it, and I guess that's just how it has to go. I mean, it's not, financially they really are compensated very well, so I don't feel too bad for them. But I do see it's not exactly what you expected, it's not what you signed up for, but it's about to be maybe reality, and it sucks. But it just kind of is what it is. I guess to come in and I understand, is the NHL just doing the extra seeds for revenue? And the answer is absolutely yes, they are. And I don't know why it's an argument or a question, because of course they're doing it for extra revenue. They need the extra revenue, because if they don't, the salary cap will probably go down next year. I mean, if they don't do something, like the league is losing quite a bit of money here, and so they have to do something to make up for that revenue. And so it makes perfect sense. And I don't think that, if it had been any team below that was, further out of the playoffs, like who's out of the playoffs right now? Like
Buffalo, for example.
Buffalo, or the San Jose Sharks, or the Ottawa Senators. I don't think that they look at it and go, Ottawa would be the 12 seed, so we won't go that far down. I don't think that didn't play a role in the ultimate conversation. The ultimate conversation, I'm sure, was we need to get as many teams as makes sense into this qualifying round, so that those teams can make money, our league can make money, and really, statistically speaking, was the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks out of the playoffs? Yes. Was there a chance they could make the playoffs? Sure. I guess there was. Beyond those teams, though, there was quite a drop off. I mean, after Anaheim's 5 points behind Chicago in the standings, who ultimately is 10 points back of really making the player, 8 points back of making the playoffs with Chicago. So, I mean, they really were such a far distance out that I don't think there's much disagreement that if there had to be 3 teams that miss it, those 3 teams, they shouldn't be in it. Also, none of the teams that made the playoffs are under 500. But all
that's
the teams,
a good point.
Montreal is the only team that's 500. All the rest are above 500. And so, I mean, to me, there's your cutoff point. Anybody who wasn't at least 500 is out of the playoffs. And it just so happens that is 4 teams in the East, 3 teams in the West, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue when you put a hard number like that, say 500. It's pretty black and white at that point. I know a lot of Buffalo Sabre fans are going to be a little upset because when you look at it, they're literally a win right outside of the playoffs.
I mean, both New Jersey and Buffalo, if they had won their like the games that they have in hand on the Montreal Canadiens, both of those teams would have the chance to be ahead of Montreal.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The way the schedule worked out, it just kind of worked out for Montreal. It didn't for Buffalo or New Jersey. I guess the one small glimmer is that, hey, you're going to get probably a better draft pick, and hopefully maybe you've got a shot at a top 3 pick, and that could change your franchise's future. Also, Buffalo versus the Pittsburgh Penguins definitely wouldn't be very favorable. I don't think anyone in Pittsburgh would be worried about that one. But
right.
Speaking of matchups, let's talk about a couple of them. Today we'll focus on those 5-12 matchups. I feel like we're in March Madness. This is like our own version of March Madness, talking 5-12s and 6-11s, and it's weird. But the 5-12 matchup in the East, the Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the Montreal Canadiens, and then the 5-12 in the West, Edmonton against the Chicago Blackhawks. Where do we want to start here, Justin?
Let's go Penguins Canadiens. Okay. Why not?
Penguins Canadiens. Let's talk forward groups for a little bit here with both these teams. Certainly, I think Pittsburgh probably gets has a huge benefit from this pause because everyone was able to get healthy, and or they just had injuries all year long and still managed to stay afloat. And now here we are. Of course, everyone's fine now. Outside of maybe I don't know how Jake Getzel's doing, but he was the one that was hurt long term, and I'm not sure his status for playing in the playoffs. But we'll find out. Where do you land on these forward groups?
Yeah, as far as injuries are concerned, NHL.com does have Gensel listed as, a guy who's likely recovered and will play from his shoulder surgery. However, I did find out today that what's-his-face, Nick Bustad, is going to undergo season-ending surgery. So he's shelved for the year, on top of, I guess, Dominic Simone is finished for the year as well. So that you're talking, 2 number 3, number 4 centers for this Pittsburgh Penguin team are going to be out. So that's an unfortunate blow, but
yeah, it sounds like Bukestad is out for at least 8 weeks, is what they're saying.
Okay,
so there is still a chance that I don't know if we're 8 weeks away from playing any games.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's very true. But as far as production goes, I don't think he's a difference maker at all, or going to be a depth guy that's really going to make a difference, not like your Matt Cullens of the old Penguin Cups. So, as far as their production, I don't see them tailing off at all because, let's face it, they're very top heavy in terms of who they have. I will say, though, I'm very excited to see Patrick Marleau finally get in here with this Penguin group and maybe get, a few extra games under his belt. Should be a lot of fun. I know that obviously we can talk all day long about the superstar power of Crosby and Malkin. And that's going to be the difference, in my opinion. You look at a team like Montreal, whereas when you're comparing forward groups, right, there's no big superstars in Montreal. You do have your Thomas Tatars and Jonathan Drouins, but
Gallagher is probably the closest thing you've, and like Domi are kind of, you're like not really superstars at all. They're just they're good players. They're first line guys.
Absolutely, but again, you don't have these game changers, and I think when you look at, Montreal, obviously we look at one guy in particular who could potentially steal a series, and that's the guy who wears number 31 back in net, and that's Carey Price. So as far as the forward groups are concerned, obviously the edge has to go to the Penguins here. So it'll be, win by committee if it's Montreal's forward group that gets it done, because they'll have to roll 4 lines that can compete, and, all 4 lines are going to need to contribute.
Yeah, the biggest question is, of course, Shea Weber, he was also, he'd been banged up at different points during this season. So you're going to get a fully healthy Shea Weber. You've got Carey Price ready to go, who usually Carey Price is, he plays quite a few games during the regular season. So I think now that, of course, he's playing a lot fewer games this year. He played 58. I mean, he would have played, there's a good chance he would have been upwards of 65, maybe 68 games by the end of the season with 11 games left. Do you think he'd probably play 9 or 10 of those games just to try and get Montreal into the playoffs if they could? Puts him at over 65 games again, but he's stopped by everything that happened. He plays 58 games. He gets a lot of time off, and I really think he is a guy who will do well because of this break. I think him playing fewer games is going to be huge. Having a healthy Shea Weber the whole time is going to be massive. I don't think that they can overcome their ineptitude on the power play and ultimately just trying to outscore the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't see that happening at all.
That's going to be a big challenge. I mean, Pittsburgh, right? You talk about special teams. They're right in the middle of the pack in terms of power play. And, again, same thing, they're sitting at number 10 in terms of team penalty kill. But when you look at the the Montreal Canadiens, obviously, they're a little bit in the bottom when it comes to power play and penalty kill. So, if it comes down to special teams, obviously you get Pittsburgh the edge there as well. And so, they're going to need a lot of Shea Weber, a lot of Jeff Petrie, and a lot of Carey Price to really, carry the load defensively and hope that their forwards can, edge out these 3-2 games that I think, Montreal is going to need if they're going to win any games here in this series.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider defensively too, Pittsburgh has been very good defensively. I mean, they're 196 goals allowed on the season. I mean, there's only 4 teams in these playoffs total that have fewer goals allowed in the Eastern Conference. 5 teams. So, I mean, for a team that we're so used to seeing give up a lot of goals to score a lot of goals, I mean, they're a plus 36, third best in the Eastern Conference in terms of goal differential, and only one team in the West is better than them, and that's the Colorado Avalanche. So, they're coming in. Pittsburgh's got to be the big favorite here. But
now the question mark for me though is, do you go back to a guy like Tristan Jarry, who's been on a roll for you lately, or do you roll with Matt Murray, the guy who has won you a couple Stanley Cups?
And that's the toughest part, right? Like there's no one's on a hot streak now. Right. It doesn't matter to me if you won 10 games in a row and now the season stopped, because here we are, 4, maybe 5. I don't know how many months till we get this thing started, and a hot streak means nothing. I think you have to ride Matt Murray. I think you got to give him at least the first 2 games. If you go and you just stink the joint up in the first or the second game, then maybe you go to Tristan Jarry. But I think you're going to give Matt Murray the chance to do what he's done twice before in the playoffs, and see what you can do.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that either. I think you have to ride the guy who's been there, who's done it and proven he can succeed in the playoffs, versus a guy like Tristan Jarry who has little to no experience. So even though both are RFAs after the season, I think it's something you got to give to Matt Murray and let him ride with it. And obviously the leash is short given his regular season performance, but it's his to lose at this point.
Yeah. I do think we are going to see some upsets here in this first round. Like get outside of that, the 8-9, I don't really think is, Leafs, Blue Jackets. I think, of course, because it's Toronto, you're going to have a lot of people who just go Toronto because it's the bigger market. But I mean, either of those teams could win. The Blue Jackets are probably so underrated because they're fully healthy now. With Calgary and Winnipeg in the 8-9, it's really not a huge difference between those teams. So it's, if the 9 wins, it's not really much of an upset in my mind. But I mean, in terms of the other ones, I mean, Minnesota wouldn't have made the playoffs, I don't think, but here they are in the playoffs, and I think they have a real chance to upset the Canucks. The Coyotes have a golden opportunity to beat the Predators here in the playoffs. Would anyone be shocked to see any of these lower seeds beat a top seed? I don't think so. I mean, maybe the only one that people would really be shocked on is the Penguins Montreal. It's probably the one that I look at and I say, if I had to, like, if I had $1,000 and I had to bet on all these series and put $1 on at least one of them, I'd probably be willing to put the vast majority of my money on the fact that the Penguins would win this series. It's probably the one that I'm most sure of, outside of Carey Price becoming 2016 Carey Price.
Yeah,
2014.
I can't really disagree with you. I mean, yeah, looking at each one of these series, especially because that first round is going to be a best of 5, it can happen really quick, and you can get yourself in a hole very, very fast. So it could be over for some of these teams before we know it. And obviously, it may come down to who's kept themselves better condition during this furlough. So
yeah, I'm also willing. I'm curious to see who ends up on the pro roster that maybe was sent down to the minors at some point. For Montreal, a guy like maybe a Jesperi Kotkaniemi who was sent down to the minors. I mean, you don't know. I don't know for Montreal if they have anybody who might be coming up from, they might have played in the AHL this year and wouldn't have come up until next year. But here we find ourselves in a weird situation where now that guy, they go, he's ready. Let's bring him up and let's do this. I think probably somewhere in these series, we're going to see a guy who played the full season in the AHL, probably wouldn't have come up to the NHL, but he'll find himself somewhere in a top 9 somewhere and make an impact in this first round.
Yeah, that's very fair to say.
I know we're not talking about the series yet, but I know that the Leafs are saying that Nick Robertson is going to be their second round pick. They're saying that he's going to be on their roster, and I mean, he's a guy who maybe a sleeper pick for a rookie of the year next year, and here he is coming into the playoffs, and suddenly you add a guy who he led his team in scoring in the AHL, I believe, and is doing very well for himself and coming up through the ranks, and now he's going to be on your roster because of the way things have played out. So those will be maybe some of the underlying things that we start to find out here as we move forward, if any new players will be joining these teams. Shall we go to the Western Conference?
Let's do it.
Let's give you a prediction, actually, on the Penguins Canadiens.
Okay, best of 5. I mean, I'd have to say Penguins take it in 4 games.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. It's going to be pretty hard to, I think, sweep at this point, just because the lack of consistency, I think, will still be there a bit. So it may be difficult to sweep, but I think I agree. Penguins in 4, we're on the same page. Let's go Edmonton Oilers and the Chicago Blackhawks. The Chicago Blackhawks make the playoffs for the first time in, 3 years?
It's been a while.
It feels weird to say that. It wasn't too long ago that it was a given that the Chicago Blackhawks were perennial playoff and Stanley Cup contenders.
Yeah, I mean, and it's weird too when you talk about perennial, playoff teams, right? We look at the West Coast, for example, and like that's one area where I'm like, man, this is, you can tell the NHL has changed in what the salary cap has done, because the teams like Anaheim, San Jose, and LA, who we thought every year were in it up until recently, and it's pretty dry out there on the West Coast.
Yes, it is very dry in California. They will get no playoff hockey during this pandemic. So sorry, guys. You'll have to watch everyone else have fun.
You can watch Edmonton on the West Coast. There you go.
There it is. And Vancouver.
That's true.
And Calgary.
Yeah, whatever. Arizona. Moving on.
Okay. Where do we want to start here? Let's start defensively, because I think that both these teams, it's probably their weakest point is on the back end. Neither of these teams built super strong from the back out. They're much better up front. So defensively speaking, where do you fall with these teams? Who do you like? Who are you looking to make an impact in this playoff series?
Yeah, this one should be quite interesting when you talk about defense, right? You look at Chicago; they've got obviously the names, Duncan Keith, and who knows about Brett Seabrook. I did hear that Calvin DeHaan might be ready for the Blackhawks now that he's had a chance to rest up, and I think probably Seabrook as well. But
Brent Seabrook said that he's feeling great after 3 surgeries, and that was about a month ago.
Okay.
So he had surgery on both hips and his right shoulder, and that was back at like the very, very beginning of the year. He was put on long-term injury on December 26th in 2019. So, I mean, he was said that he was going to be out for 3 to 4 months based on what he had. So I would think that he'll be back for the playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, not just, obviously he's not going to produce anything offensively that's really going to give this team a major boost, but I do think his experience come playoff time should be interesting because, obviously obviously we know Chicago's success that they've had those 3 cups, but what I'm interested to see is how some of these older defensemen for the Blackhawks, the Duncan Keiths, the Seabrooks, who might log a lot of minutes, are going to handle this speedy Edmonton team, right? You talk about up front, you got guys like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, McDavid, obviously, Tyler Ennis, Anthony Ciu, guys who can really fly, guys who can skate, and can Chicago's defense keep up and slow them down?
Well, Justin, I hear Brent Seabrook just got 2 new hips.
But do they work?
Did they put rockets in them? That's the real question.
It absolutely is. And then when on the flip side you look at Edmonton's defense, obviously they don't have any, experience back there, but they got a lot of young guys who, for example, a Darnell Nurse for me, who could be a potential difference maker for this team on the back end. And
we also only got to see 2 games out of Mike Green in an Edmonton Oilers uniform,
right?
He is a guy, and he is somebody who certainly would benefit from a little bit of time off and kind of healing himself back up. And I think maybe he's a wild card in this series because we haven't really seen him play with the Oilers, and if he can add that, create a second pairing that can really move the puck or be a second power play option or first line power play option. I mean, not that they struggled on the power play or anything, but
right, only the best in the league. But.
Yeah. But I mean, to be able to add that extra dynamic, I think that was one of the moves that we looked at the deadline and said, hey, this move could be very beneficial for the Oilers. It really could. It kind of gives them a little bit of an edge when it comes to facing off at other teams where before they had really no defensive help beyond Larson, Clefbaum, Nurse. I mean, we weren't really looking at Chris Russell as much, and you got other guys who can play but are mostly 5'6" guys. Mike Green comes in, he's a top 4 option and fills that out, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, anytime you can add a guy with, obviously his veteran leadership and his experience on the back end, I mean, it's invaluable and will be definitely needed to an Edmonton Oilers team that is obviously doesn't have a lot of experience in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, only that one playoff series a few years ago, or I guess they had 2 playoff series. They made it to the playoffs a few years ago. Well, let's move. Continuing back to the goaltending before we go to the obvious strengths of both teams, that is their offense. Corey Crawford will likely be the goaltender of choice for the Chicago Blackhawks here, I think. And then for the Edmonton Oilers, Mike Smith?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right, you're clearly not going to Malcolm Subban to lead this team in the playoffs. So it's Corey Crawford's net at this point. But, yeah, that's the interesting one is in Edmonton, right? You look at Mike Smith, who last year, obviously, with Calgary, right, he was a 1A, 1B with, David Rittich, but went in the playoffs and actually looked pretty good. And so now he's kind of in a similar situation in Edmonton where he's a 1A, 1B. I mean, they literally split time, 39 games for Smith, 38 for Mikko Koskinen. Obviously, they kind of want Koskinen to be the goaltender of the future just because of the way their previous GM paid him out to be anyways.
Sure.
And he did obviously have a better statistical season, but in my mind, I still think Mike Smith played good enough and has the experience and success in the playoffs. I mean, he literally took an Arizona Coyote team and put them on his back and went to the conference finals. And I think, you look at that and the success he had last year and you say, okay, we got a guy here who knows what he's doing in the playoffs. And I think, much like, the Pittsburgh Penguins, obviously no cup winners here, but you got a guy with success who's done it in the playoffs. So I think you ride him with, maybe a short leash as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's he is a guy who can get hot. That's just the kind of goalie that he's always been. I mean, he has his ups, he has his downs. He's fantastic when he's up. And as long as he's not just handing the puck away, trying to play it too often, he's I think an inspiring goaltender to play for because he moves the puck, because he's willing to take chances. I think he's probably really fun to play with. It's just when he makes those mistakes and they were avoidable, that's when it can be really deflating for especially a young team like the Oilers. Although, how young are they really? They just have a couple high-end young players. The rest of them are not that young. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how all that comes together for both teams from the goaltending position. I mean, Corey Crawford was actually playing pretty well towards the end of the regular season. He did win 5 of his last 7 games. So, I mean, he certainly was showing up, playing really well. And, I mean, I wonder now, he gets a little bit of time to rest. What's going to happen with him? I mean, maybe, this series really could be this sleeper goaltender battle because you've got these 2 goaltenders who are both over the age of 35. I think Crawford's over. Crawford's
he is,
35.
Yeah.
And Mike Smith is 36, 37. And so you might have both these guys beautifully rested, ready for what might be their last playoff run of their career.
Yeah, very well could be. And I think you're going to see, I'm excited. That's one thing I'm excited about this long break that it's hopefully going to bring in the playoffs is a lot of the older goaltenders who, maybe trying to make that last hurrah. We should see some really, really good goaltending. I mean, guys, we talked about him, Marc-Andre Fleury, Henrik Lundqvist, guys who have stolen series and stolen playoff rounds. It should be fun to watch.
Yeah, let's move forward to the offensive side of this. I guess my question first is, who do you think they're going to try and put on Connor McDavid? Is this a team defense against Connor McDavid, or are you going to Jonathan Toews and saying, this is the defensive responsibility of your life? Go out and shut down Connor McDavid as best you can.
I mean, let's be honest, right? Regardless who you put on Connor McDavid, the problem is not so much.
You got another one,
right? You've got Leon Draisaitl, the Art Ross Trophy winner now, that you have to worry about, right? So you've got your top 2 centers in Chicago, and Jonathan Toews and Dylan Strome, right? Dylan Strome, I obviously don't have a lot of faith in defensively to maybe get the job done against either one of those guys. But I think, below him, there's not much else either, right? Obviously Kirby Dach, their third line center right now. But I think right now you're just going to have to get it done by committee because assuming that it's, 3 games for the higher seed, 2 games for the home, obviously Edmonton's going to get last change. And I think they're going to try to keep, McDavid or Draisaitl away from Toews as much as possible. And, whether that's going to work out or not, I don't know. But obviously, anytime either one of those guys are on the ice, you might see Jonathan Toews get double shifted quite a bit in this series because they're going to want to see, him, shutting down at least one of those top lines.
Sure. I mean, in between Draisaitl and McDavid played almost 22 minutes a game. And you had Draisaitl at 22:37, the most he's ever played in his career on average. And a lot of times there was that conversation, can you keep playing these guys this much in the regular season and then go to the playoffs and have them be just as effective? Well, you know what? In these playoffs, the answer is yes. because they have had plenty of rest. They can play probably 25 minutes a night here in the playoffs and be very effective. I mean, you could essentially double shift these guys the whole entire, at least a 5-game series, at least for a couple games, to guarantee yourself, likely like between Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, like each of those guys could potentially win you one game apiece. The way that they play, I mean, as long as the rest of the team is playing average hockey, both those guys could win you a game each, and then you just have to find a couple, a combination of some other players that are helping you to win some other games and that are stepping up. To me, it's going to be really hard for Chicago to win this series unless some of their younger guys have found some kind of, they maybe took this time and were able to get stronger and become better players in this, what I would just call an off season, right? Like, we're going through an off season, and how many guys do we see come back after an off season and either they've improved drastically or they've fallen off the wagon? Yeah,
I think, in order for Chicago to have any chance at this, right, they're going to need, guys outside of, Caves and Kane, and maybe you can throw in Brandon Saad and DeBrincat in that, but they're going to need those other depth forward guys to really step up. Your Kirby Docks, your Zach Smiths, your Dylan Stromes. I think these guys are really going to have to step up and produce, because let's face it, like we talked about, there's a two-headed monster in front of you where either one of those guys can win a game. And, if you have to go line for line right now, it's not looking in favor for Chicago. So, it kind of leans towards Edmonton at this point. And I think, if Edmonton can get a little production out of their third and fourth lines, I think they would be very happy with that. And hopefully guys like Anthony Ciu and James Neal can maybe chip in a few goals here or there. And if they do so, that should be pretty good for Edmonton at that point.
I'll never count Patrick Kane out. I just won't. The guy can do so many things on his own. It's ironic that, I mean, in most games he's the best player. Even now, like you go head to head, Patrick Kane against most teams in the NHL, and he is the best player on the ice. In this series, he's the third best.
Right, and that's. I mean, how rarely can we say a guy like Patrick Kane isn't the best guy on the ice for a series? I mean, it's crazy to really think about. But I mean, if you're Edmonton, for example, and you're looking for matchups, who are you throwing against Kane? Are you going to try to match up McDavid just because maybe you're thinking of speed, or do you want to go with Leon Draisaitl because you think maybe his defensive capabilities are just a little bit better, in my opinion, than a guy like Connor McDavid?
Yeah, I guess you're deciding as the Oilers are going to have to figure out, like, how much are Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid going to play together and apart. We know that they had been playing apart. Of course, Draisaitl has more than proven that he can do it by himself, because when McDavid was out, Draisaitl just kept going. And so it's not a matter of does he need McDavid there, which to me says they should be separated all the way. I mean, they should only play together on the power play, and when they're, when you're down a goal with 3 minutes left to go or whatever, you put them out there together. But I think in general they play separately, and to me it doesn't really matter. Both of them are playing center. You're not really, I guess, going out of your way. You could to cover Patrick Kane, but I think you're they're going to be so focused on you that it's actually just less about Kane and more about McDavid or Draisaitl. Like, one of those two guys is going to be on the ice almost the whole game.
It's scary to think about.
Well, let's any final thoughts on this series?
Yeah, I guess maybe, good luck to Chicago, because if we talk about predictions here, I'm not too excited for them.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that could be their secret weapon is, Alexander Nylander. He's skating over in Sweden, and a 22-year-old guy who's been underrated. Of course, he was dealt at the deadline, and he comes in here, he gets a fresh start, and maybe it's enough maybe I don't know how hard he's been working, but he's had the opportunity to escape being in Sweden. And so maybe he's kind of gets somewhat of a leg up and comes back and he's ready to go and he's a new player. And, if, younger guys like Dylan Strome, even Alex DeBrincat, if he can find another level here, well, we've essentially had another offseason. Same with Kirby Dach. I think there are some players on this Chicago Blackhawks team that could potentially be much better when they come back. Adam Boqvist is another guy who, you get one off season, a 4-month period where you get to work on one thing that maybe was a weakness and suddenly it's not anymore. That can make a massive difference. And if Chicago hits on the right buttons for this series, Corey Crawford, he's done it before. I'm not going to count him out. And he was playing very well in January and February and March. And so I'm down to see what the Chicago team can do. It may be a final hurrah for this Duncan Keith, Seabrook, Kane, Taves, Saad group. But if they could win just this one series, then you don't know what might happen. I mean, Chicago would, I guess, go on to play, well, a much better team in the second round. It'll be a lot harder. This is probably, I can't see them winning a round against St. Louis or Colorado, Vegas or Dallas, depending on how they, ultimately shake these playoff matches up. That's going to be a tough second round. But hey, you get hot and you never know. That's the one. It sucks when you're the team who's really good, but it's the best part of hockey is that any team can win on any given night because you can have, when you have one great player on your team and a hot goalie, you can do anything if your team's coached well enough. Yeah,
it should be a lot of fun.
So your final prediction for this series is?
I'll take Edmonton, but in 5.
In 5 games, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Edmonton here too. And I don't want to be the same. I'm going to say Edmonton sweeps the series.
Okay. That's wow. Yeah.
I ultimately don't think they can handle the McDavid-Draisaitl combo.
I thought about that, but honestly, I think when you mentioned last hurrahs, I think, guys like Keith and, Corey Crawford especially, I think they'll show up and maybe, take a game and just slip one out in overtime perhaps and, push the series. But ultimately, I do think, like you talk about, McDavid and Draisaitl are just too much. And, ultimately will doom Chicago.
I talked about younger guys coming back faster and worked out some kinks in their game. What older player is going to come back worse? That's the other question you got to ask, because there will be somebody that you go, oh, what was he doing during quarantine? What happened to him? So for Chicago, there's a few guys that has the potential to be. So, all right, that is the 512 show. Our next show, we still will eventually get to. I know we had talked about doing Team Finland, top 10 players from Finland. If you haven't listened to all the top 10 players all time from every NHL team, subscribe to the show. You can go back and listen to those. And now we've started top 10 players from each country. So those will be fun. And but for now we actually have real hockey to talk about. We might take a little bit of a deviation from that for a little while, but eventually, somewhere along the line, you'll be pleasantly surprised with a little Finnish show, and we'll continue that series as we go along. I'm sure by the time we get through all these series, we'll still have like another 8 weeks before actual hockey starts. So we'll definitely get those in. But until then, you can follow us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, any final thoughts?
No, just who am I kidding? Yeah, I said no. So no final thoughts.
No, okay. All right. Well, we will talk to you guys very soon and enjoy now what hopefully is decent weather for you. I know it's been nice and hot for us, and stay safe out there. We will talk to you guys very soon.